I want to understand what made you choose to work in this field. What was your brain thinking at that time?
My brain was not thinking anything. I was a young boy who wanted to play cricket in South Africa, and I grew up in the apartheid, so people of color could not play for the country. I had no other option, and I was not ready to leave sport. So I studied sports and exercise science, and I became a strength and conditioning and a high performance coach very early. I've been coaching professional athletes from the time I'm 19 years old. I've been in the setup from the time I'm 13 years old at a state level, international, national level. And at 18, when I decided to become a coach, before, in my very, very first year of academics, I was already the high performance director with the team at the moment was the KwaZulu-Natal Dolphins. They had Sean Pollock, we had Jonty Rhodes, and all of these guys were in there. Eldine Baptiste, Nixon McLean from the West Indies were part of it. We had Andrew Hudson, Errol Stewart. We had an exceptional team. That was the team that I started coaching. And I felt that, I got moved into that direction, leaning into the strength of cognition. I think one of my greatest abilities is to look at things from multiple perspectives. And I can balance technique, I can balance tactic, I can balance the body, the mind. I have a vast experience across different codes of sports, so I can pull learnings in from everywhere.
One question that always comes to me whenever I see someone achieving in their field, may it be cricket, may it be football, may it be any kind of sport or any kind of avenue in life, and when they are achieving, it always astonishes me to understand that what is the mindset that is going behind them that makes them stand apart, because there are a lot of people trying, but then there's that few who actually break the mold and reach,
Absolutely.
because there has to be that one X factor on them.
There is one X factor.
And I want you to throw some light on that, because I really want to understand what makes them stand apart mentally.
So the difference between good and great is got nothing to do with equipment, money, technique, or anything like that. The difference between good and great has everything to do with the narrative, the reframing. Now, to put more context to what we're talking about, if you're the most successful athlete in your sport, you're probably experiencing 30% of success. If you're an average athlete, you're experiencing less than 15% of success. But 15% means you're still relatively successful as the world would know you in terms of how you're making it. But 15% of success means you're dealing with a lot of failure. Okay. Now, one of the biggest deterrents when it comes to failure is the narrative that we play in our mind when we experience failure. Okay. So what do you tell yourself? That narrative is the X factor.
How did you get to the Indian cricket team?
Firstly, I got to the Indian cricket team in 2003. I was a technical analyst. And because I was working at state level in Durban, John Wright, who was the coach at the time, he wrote to the coach I was working with, elderly man by the name of Phil Russell. He says, I'm bringing the Indian team there. I'm looking for a technical coach or an analyst who understands all of the conditions in South Africa really well. And Phil put me forward. He says, you take him because he's been my understudy. With Phil, I studied grounds. I knew curatorship. I knew how to prepare a pitch. I understood conditions. I could measure moisture. I understood every single variable because my first mentor wasn't a coach. My first mentor was a curator at a ground. So he taught me everything about how to read pitches. So Phil recommended me to John, and that's how I joined the team. And my job with the team was really to analyze pitch conditions and help John determine whether to play the extra seamer, whether to play bowlers who would hit the deck harder or those who would pitch it up and swing it. We had Zaid Khan, Ashish Nehra who would swing bowlers. We had Javagal Srinath who would hit the deck a little bit. And then we had two spinners. We had Harbhajan who would turn it and we had Kumble who would skid on. And based on conditions, my job was to determine, who should we play in which conditions.
So that's the role of a technical coach.
Well, yeah.
What exactly is the role of a technical coach?
Well, in that particular role, that's exactly what I was doing, analyzing pitch conditions and doing that. A technical coach could be very, very different. He could be working on technique. He could bring in different strategies into play. It all depends on what skill you're complementing with the head coach in there. I've done that role where I was only looking at biomechanics. I did that role where I was developing strategy. With Phil, when I was working, a lot of things were strategy. So, for example, interesting stories today when you look at cricket, and you see the players who are not playing, you see them wear a vest.
Yeah.
Right. Back in when I was with the team from 1999 to say 2004, 2005, that rule wasn't in place. So we used to have 11 people on the field. You'd have a 12th man, and then you'd have about four other people in the change room. And I knew, as a psychologist, I knew if the game got really tight and the pressure was dialed up, the batsman who was striking, if he scanned the ground, he would be very difficult for him to determine who's inside the rope and who's outside because there was no vest. So in the last 2 overs, I used to send all my players to just stand at different positions of the boundary so that the batter didn't know actually who was in and who was out. Was it cheating? Maybe. It was bending the rules because there was no rule in place
Exactly.
around that. So we did that. This is why they vest today, because we exploited the rule back there and we won 5 championships in 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, we also created, I created another piece of equipment because I created a batting pad because I realized one thing, there was no Hawkeye. There was no action replay, you know. The umpires were left to their own accord for most of the time.
Right.
And when the ball hit a pad, okay, based on where it bounced, the umpire was making an assumption of whether it hit him straight or not. Very simple. They put this together themselves. So I said, how can I F with their mind a little bit as such? So we created pads where it wasn't rounded in front. It was an edge.
Oh.
Right. So every time it hit the pad, it would shoot off to fine leg or third man, and they would automatically think it didn't strike him in front.
Oh,
and
nice.
stuff like that. That there.
Was that legal?
No, the cricket board. We managed it with one game only. The cricket board banned that as well.
Was short
But,
of a thing.
you know, I'm giving you all these stories because this is what a technical coach does. We look at ways in which to bend the rules. And I keep getting called to advise and mentor young sports scientists or people in sport. And I tell them, if you're going to be an advantage to your team, you need to know every single rule inside out. Yeah, because your advantage is not going to come from applying a rule. It's going to come from knowing where to bend the rule.
Bend the rules.
You know, as the Japanese say, you have to know where the bamboo bends. And that's the secret, actually.